Hello and greetings, everyone out there. No matter what part of the world you're in, we want to say hello to you all. And welcome to another Facebook Live or live stream about the world of finances. Today, we're going to focus on the housing challenges that are existing for our military families who often relocate to places where they are not familiar with or have knowledge or resources available during this time of PCSing. And according to the 2021 AFMLS, one of the top 5 issues affecting our military families is PCS and relocation. And shameless plug, the AFMLS for 2022 is currently open to all. So make sure that you take the survey. Here at Blue Star Families, we are taking a deeper dive into the housing issues military families have recently faced. So please take some time to complete it as it informs our decision making here at Blue Star Families, and it is used as a signal in the field of multiple stakeholders across a variety of issues. So again, thank you everyone for joining me. My name is Brittney Aladetohun, and I have the pleasure of being the JP Morgan Chase DEPLOY Fellow for this year. I want to introduce our dynamic panel of women, which everyone is so excited to learn about. So first we have Delara Wentz. She is the owner and operator of the Balian Group located in Northern Virginia. She is a top performing realtor in the area, and Delara is also an active duty United States Marine Corps spouse, and she is a mom of one handsome son. And she became licensed in 2018. And guess what, you all? She has a 95% referral based business in the area. And so I'm happy that she is here to join us today. So, hey, Delara.
Thanks so much
Next
for
up,
having me.
you're very welcome. And next up, we have Megan Harless. She is an Army veteran and a military spouse. Wow. And she is a mom to 3 amazing children and is passionate about educating others on regulations and policies of PCS, all while working on reform efforts to streamline and simplify the process for military families. Megan has worked with members of Congress, U.S. Transportation Command, and members of the moving industry to identify key pain points of processes and to draft solutions to be implemented for families. So, thank you so much for being here, Megan. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, yes. And lastly, we have Lizanne Lightfoot. She is the senior content editor of PCS Grades, a company that makes moving easier with reviews by and for military families. She has created area guides, for numerous military bases, and she manages guest writers who share a variety of perspectives on PCS moves. She is also the co-host of the PCS Grades webinar, so make sure you check those out as well, which interviews experts from the moving industry and the real estate market to provide resources and solutions for military families as they PCS. She is also a Marine Corps spouse and a mom to 5 kids. So Lizanne is very, very busy. And in addition to that, she is known as the seasoned spouse for her blog. And she won the title of Military Spouse of the Year at NAB Coronado in 2019. And she has also published hundreds of articles, several books, and several articles, And her latest book is Open Win: Letters of Encouragement for Military Spouses. Thank you so much, Lizanne, for being here with us today.
Thank you, Brittany. It's definitely a pleasure. Happy to represent PCS Grades.
Definitely. And one thing I wanted to add about Megan, she's also won a Spouse Changemaker of the Year award, and she is the owner of PCS Like a Pro. I just wanted to add that in there. So thank you all again for being here today. So I just wanted to jump right in because we know that there is a housing crunch right now. There's a housing shortage. There are so many issues going on for military families and civilian families. So, but before we get into that, I do want to ask because I focus on military spouse unemployment a lot, which is also a top issue. So, Delara, Megan, and Lizanne, how did you all get started in your particular career fields? Can you share your story and journey of becoming realtors, becoming writers, becoming a PCS reform advocate? How did this all happen for you all? Because sometimes this is really difficult for spouses to get into a particular field. And Delara, I'll let you go first.
Thank you so much. So I got into real estate in 2018. I was living paycheck to paycheck with my husband. We were in the middle of the grocery store arguing about cucumbers and if we were going to be able to get to the checkout stand without our card declining. And that was kind of my breakthrough. I had purchased a home that ended up being a money pit, and my realtor wasn't fantastic, but I decided, if she could do it, I could do it. And I really wanted to help military families not get in the same situation that I was in. So I hit the ground running in 2018 and helped many, many military families purchase homes and help their financial wealth.
Thank you, Delara. What an amazing story. And Megan, what about you? And you're muted. We can't hear you.
My apologies. So I got started in PCS reform work back in 2018. If we remember, 2018 was a hard year for everybody. It seemed like every experience we heard was just a negative experience. So at the time, I had my blog site, Military Spouse Chronicles, where it was telling kind of the military lifestyle perspective from the spouse and family viewpoint of things. And so I wrote an open letter turned change.org petition about a general military family's grievance to the PCS process, that we're tired of things showing up broken, damaged. Not at all. We wanted better accountability. We wanted better transparency. And this petition very quickly got 100,000 signatures and got the attention of Transcom and Congress and the moving industry. And so since then, we've been able to form several different panels, one with Transcom, one with the moving industry. Each of the services now have their own advisory panel where spouses sit on them, and we provide feedback as to what is going on the ground, what experiences families are having, and what we can do to kind of improve the process and the experience with all the stakeholders together at the table.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Megan. That goes to show the power of just one person's voice making a change. So thank you for that. Lizanne, now you're up.
Yeah, thanks. I started my Seasoned Spouse blog in 2016, mainly in response to the military sending my family of 6 to the very expensive Southern California area. And we just needed the extra income, but couldn't afford childcare. So writing was a way that I could work from home with my kids. And a few years later, after getting my foot into that freelancing community and writing for the military community, PCS Grades was looking for someone to expand their area guides and raise the quality of the blog content that was on their site. So in 2020, just before the pandemic, they invited me onto the team, and I've been working as an editor there ever since.
That is awesome. I'm so glad that PCS Grades decided to bring you on. So thank you all so much for sharing your story. I think each of you speak to some of the top issues that we normally see throughout our AFMLS survey every year. So now I want to jump right in. So we know what's going on with the real estate market. There's so much demand, very little inventory for families, especially for military families that are PCSing. And they're wanting to purchase a home or they're wanting to rent. So I'll start with you, Delara. Can you tell us a little bit more about the market? Like what is going on? What's happening?
So it changes week by week right now. The biggest thing that we've been seeing is affordability, not just inventory, but if somebody can afford to get in a house. BAH is so different up and around the DMV area. So my husband is stationed at Quantico, and our BAH is almost $1,000 less than a 25-minute ride north. So affordability has been a huge issue, and multiple offer situations has kind of cooled down, but it's still happening depending house to house. And now with the rise in interest rates, it should be very interesting to see what happens in the coming weeks for sure.
Definitely. Thank you so much for sharing. And you're right. The BAH is an issue, and it's also at 95% right now, right? So that is also affecting and impacting a lot of our families, especially with inflation and different things happening. So, Megan, I want to ask you, what do you think is going on with the market? What can you tell us from your knowledge?
Yeah, so I mean, with the housing market as we see it and as it's been mentioned, just being kind of crazy as it is, we're seeing a lot of families that were once in the market of purchasing a home kind of switching and looking at what their other options are. And we're seeing a lot of families pivot to wanting to now live on post. And depending on where you're located at, that's providing its own set of issues as well, because we're seeing some locations on post housing wait lists are running 6 to 9 months before there is housing available. So that's still pushing families to try to figure something out, whether it's finding a short-term rental off post somewhere, trying to figure out purchasing a home. But it's just a whole slew of issues with trying to find a home to live in and what your options are depending on what your location is.
Definitely. And Lizanne, I know you also do a lot of research on this, so I would love for you to chime in here as well.
Yeah, we are definitely hearing a lot of frustration. A lot of families really struggling this year. And I think it's a complex issue. It's not just one thing. It's not just inflation. It's not just the housing market. But if you think back a few years ago when the housing market was strong and people wanted to live off base, the privatized housing companies actually had difficulty filling the homes on base. And so the DoD opened that up years ago to retirees and DoD civilians and additional people to be qualified to live on base. And that was great for those companies, but it also meant that base housing was maximized near capacity. And so it really wasn't able to adjust to the sudden influx of the higher housing market, the more challenging ability of being able to afford a home in the base areas. And if we think about it, BAH is calculated every January. And so our BAH rates have not changed throughout the year since January 1st. And we did receive, on average, across the board, military families saw about a 5% increase in BAH this year, which sounded great in January. But since then, I think rental rates around the country, I saw an average increase of 25 to 26% nationwide. Obviously, that varies by city. Similar with the housing market, we're seeing a huge increase. And so those BAH rates just really are not keeping up with the rental and the mortgage markets in the areas around base, which is, like Megan said, why everyone is flocking to get on these base housing waiting lists.
Definitely. Thank you both so much for that knowledge. Very great insight. Delara, I want to kick it over to you, specifically when it comes to the National Capital Region, DMV area. You're working with a lot of military families, and I know you already mentioned a lot of this before, but do you have some specific challenges that families in the National Capital Region where buying a home is so very expensive? What are some of the challenges that they are facing when it comes to finding a home to rent or purchase in that specific area, and how are you helping them?
Yeah, so specifically here, we've seen such an increase in everything. So whether you're purchasing or whether you're renting. So, for example, 2 years ago, I used to rent something to a family for 1,900, and now it's renting for 2,800. So whether you're trying to rent or purchase, the affordability, BH just doesn't cover it. Most of my families are paying out of pocket, and an astronomical amount of out of pocket depending on where they're located, or they're moving even further out, which means less time with their families and a very long commute. But however, we have been able to help many families get into homes, especially now that the market's starting to cool down a little bit with higher interest rates, getting people closing costs as far as purchasing, finding private rentals. If somebody posts something on Zillow, we're still calling them as an agent to ask it, what it would take to get our clients into that rental. The biggest issue that we're facing is a lot of people are going to have to live on base and are needing to live on base, and they can't live anywhere else because they can't afford it. The short-term rentals and everything are also packed to the max. If you look at Airbnb rentals in our area, they're all booked for like months in advance. So it's definitely been a difficult time. We're doing our best to, help most of them get into homes. We always try to, see if they're qualified to purchase a home, because it's good for them as far as financial freedom later on down the road when we think of retirement or separating from the military, especially in this area with all the growth. But the best we can do is educate before they get here so they have a game plan in place.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Delara. That's such great information. Being that we were talking about buying a home, right? It's known that a lot of sellers, right, and agents are not too familiar with the VA loan. So this creates issues with taking on a buyer due to misconceptions about the selling processes being longer, or the particularity, around the appraisal process, and the misconceptions that the seller may have to pay closing costs, something you mentioned just now. This results in buyers being more inclined to accept cash offers or those using conventional loans. So how do you help our military families that are using that VA loan get the house that they desire, Delara?
Yeah, so we've been really good at this for the last 2 years, actually, not waiving home inspections or anything like that as well. The biggest thing is the lack of education on VA loans. I have had more conventional loans actually come in with lower appraisals than I have VA in the last year, in the last 12 months. So I think it's really important to educate the agent on the other side. Believe it or not, even though we have a ton of military here and a ton of government workers, they still aren't well educated in the VA loan. And most of our buyers are going to be way more qualified than the people who have to put down a down payment, because our buyers can keep the money in their pockets. So this last year, we did a really good job about educating the other side that we are going to get to the closing table and that our buyer is stronger. We partnered with our lenders to, call ahead of time and make sure that those people on the other end know how strong of a buyer we actually have. But it was difficult for a long time. But we did notice that a lot of people stopped taking as many cash offers because they just didn't want investors buying their homes that they've loved for the last 20 plus years. So definitely seeing a change in attitude as far as VA loan, but really educating them that, hey, I've had more conventional appraisals come back in low than I have VA, and I'll help you out as far as putting an appraisal packet together and what VA appraisers are looking for and those kind of things. So definitely almost partnering with the other side in order to get both sides to the closing table.
That's awesome. And that speaks to the power, again, of using a realtor who is well versed in the VA loan. So if you're in the National Capital Region, I'm putting the plug out there, go check out Delara. I wanted to ask, though, a follow-up for all of you. Do you all have anything else to add to that? Are you seeing this in your particular area, that there are people who are accepting more cash offers than VA loans, or are you seeing it kind of trend towards what Delara is saying is happening in the National Capital Region?
Yeah, I'd love to join in if I may.
Definitely.
PCS Grades, we do work with a network of military-friendly real estate agents across the country. And so obviously every city is a little bit different, every market's a little bit different. But what we're hearing overall is that, yes, there has been a huge resistance to VA loans, especially in the past year. Hopefully it looks like things might be about to turn a corner or change slightly in the market. But a lot of what Delara was saying is people keep talking about that need for education on both sides. They need to educate the sellers. They need to educate the buyers. We need to educate military families about how to use the VA loan, and a lot of these stigmas and misconceptions that are attached to it, with the length of closing time, whether or not they can put money down, the appraisal issues. A lot of those can be worked out, but only if, like she was just saying, if both sides are willing to negotiate and at least consider those VA offers. So I know that this is a frustration that goes way beyond the National Capital Region, and we are trying to connect our constituents and our customers always with those military-friendly agents that really understand the situations that a military family is going through, what BAH means, what your timeline looks like for a PCS, and how that all impacts your home buying process.
Thank you both so much. So I wanted to move on to something else as well. So in our 2021 MFLS, we found that families who had recently PCS were less satisfied with their housing than their peers who had not recently PCS, perhaps indicating that families may have limited choices and that they're pretty much settling for something that does not fully meet their factors and their criteria when searching for a new home. So are you also finding that due to costs, families are settling when buying homes? Are you seeing this, Lizanne, at all? I'll kick it back to you, and then we'll go to Delara.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll speak in broad terms at first, but I'll also say that it has impacted my family personally. So we do know that during the pandemic, more families were forced to buy homes sight unseen. Travel was restricted. A lot of that 10-day house hunting leave was not granted. So families were being forced to figure out a housing situation while they were still living overseas or living on the other side of the country, and kind of just taking whatever they could get their hands on. In those past couple of years, the market was going so quickly that there really wasn't time to wait for an offer to come up online and visit the home and decide whether or not you like it and put in your offer. So it means that people really were just kind of jumping on whatever was available. And of course, that means that the more desirable school districts were always more competitive. They've become higher priced. And that, again, goes to the importance of knowing that local real estate agent who can really walk military families through that process and be sympathetic to the needs of doing things from a distance. I've bought a home before completely online, had to have other people sign the paperwork for me. And it's a complicated process, but it can be done. And I'll just say that we had to move as a family of 7 in 2020, near the end of the year. And we found that the rental rates around our base were just way higher than my husband's BAH. So we couldn't afford to rent. We could afford the local mortgages, but we already owned a home in another part of the country. So we did not really want to buy a house. And especially because we were moved to southern Mississippi, which is a hurricane zone. The prospect of home ownership in this area really wasn't that appealing. But we were in that same boat of just looking at offers and putting in an offer on a home as soon as it came online. And the day that we had put in an offer on a home that we really didn't want, that had a giant crack through the foundation, that same day we were offered a house on base, and we took the on base house.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
It's been
Laura, did you want to step in here? I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. That just hurt my heart so bad when you said a crack through the foundation. Yeah, so we had a lot of hard conversations with some people. So Virginia is actually a great place for people to retire, for them to do their twilight tour. And so a lot of people are like, well, this will be my forever home 1.0, transition home. And it kind of was that conversation of, hey, you're really not going to find your forever home in this market. If we do, fantastic. Unfortunately, the inventory is just not there. So I actually had quite a few people who took a back seat, and I definitely was more comfortable with them making that decision because their BAH was high enough to reach the rental income. However, when we got into the twos, it became just more appealing, I would say, to purchase a home. And especially as the prices kept increasing. So like, I know I purchased a home last year and I already have almost $100,000 of equity in it. But people did compromise, and it was really sad to see people trying to, none of my clients, but trying to waive septic and well inspections, which is astronomical to replace and stuff. And I would never, ever advise anybody do that. But people were desperate and are desperate still to get into the homes that they want to purchase. And so it's also putting sellers in a really bad situation too. I mean, I've had some military people move and they try to tell them like, hey, we're not going to do any repairs. Or the buyer says, hey, you don't have to do any repairs. It's all going to be fine. And now we've got some buyers having buyer's remorse and blaming the sellers. And I hate to see my military people in that situation too. We CYA everything. However, when somebody's upset, they'll do anything they can. But a lot of people settling to get into the home, and I don't think they're realizing what the repercussions of that is. Like when you check that box that you're not going to do a home inspection, you are acquiring that home as is in the state that it's in at the date of the offer here in the Northern Virginia area. There is no real going back and forth with the seller at that point. So definitely, it's been hard for sure.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Those are a lot of things that have been going on, and it is very disheartening to hear that. And I hope that people take the survey and mention those things so we can get some data on that, and be able to speak to that issue when we present our AFMLS findings to our stakeholders. Megan, I wanted to ask you, did you have any experience with this or something to add for the situation?
No, just to echo what everybody else really said, with the VA loan, it's just been a struggle. We've heard that a lot from a lot of families, which is why it's always important to make sure you have a good real estate team and lending team that understands the VA loan process and what is needed there, and can help work through either with, the seller side or the buyer side of getting what is needed to be able to utilize that VA loan. It's an entitlement that's for our military families, and they want to be able to use it, and they don't want to be talked into using a conventional loan. So just really having somebody that can know how to use the VA loan and what is needed for it and can be able to work through is just very important. But we've seen some families, not get the home that they wanted just because of what the market is. When we were in the market looking for a new home at our next location, we were in that same kind of group of trying to find something that met our needs and met our budget, and just where did we have to compromise with to try to figure out what home was going to work for us.
Awesome. So, what are some tips for families that are PCSing right now in this very moment, whatever region they're going to? What would you say to them right now? Because these are very real issues, and people want solutions, and they want solutions right now. So, anybody can start.
I'll go. So, having a plan in place, so finding those resources and definitely planning as best as you can. Now, the plan probably won't be executed in the way that you would like it to, but to at least have some guidelines as far as, who am I talking to on the other side? I remember like a while ago, when you PCS, you got a sponsor and they kind of showed you around and everything like that. And I do feel like that's gone away. I mean, when we PCSed here, we didn't have a sponsor. My husband had just come from Bahrain. And so we were kind of in the dark as far as where to live. And I really wish we didn't buy the house that we did in the area that we did, but teach their own. But definitely having at least a plan in place or a guideline in order to follow it on your way in, and making sure that you have people on the other side in order to advocate for you or guide you through your next PCS for sure.
Thank you, Delara. And before I answer, I did want to put in this quick stat from my AFMLS. So the top factors for finding housing for military families are distance to base, safety, desirable school districts, something we've all been mentioning, and also pets allowed, and BA fully covering the cost. And the very top factor is distance to base, with 64% of our respondents stating that that is a top priority. And then the second would be 57% of our respondents type saying safety. So I know PCS Grace does some amazing things. So how are you guys helping families, or what are some tips and strategies that you would add on to what Delara was just saying, Lizanne?
Yeah, I think she really emphasized the importance of researching your area and knowing as much as you can learn about that new area before you choose to buy a house, before you commit to a school district. And obviously, a lot of times we get orders to places where we've never lived. We might have never even thought of that state before. So your starting knowledge might be zero. But that's where PCS Grades has created these area guides, and we have neighborhood reviews to really increase your knowledge and give you a more well-rounded view of what that area is like. So our area guides include information about different types of neighborhoods that are popular for military families. So it's, instead of just looking up blindly on a Google map and trying to figure out where should I live, it's telling you, well, this neighborhood over here is 20 minutes away from the main gate. The average housing cost is this. You'll find 2-story condos. And, it really gives you a lot more details about the types of neighborhoods that are available, how far they are from base, what style of living you can expect. And it helps you visualize putting your family in that situation. And then to go a little deeper, we have these neighborhood reviews, which we're so proud of, because all of our reviews are written by and for military families. They include on-base neighborhoods as well as off-base apartment complexes, public housing areas. And it really gives you the experience of someone who has lived there before, the good, the bad, the ugly, what they would tell people who are moving to that area. So we always encourage everyone, whether you've lived on or off base, whatever housing you're in right now, please go to PCS Grades and read those reviews, leave a review. It really helps people to develop the picture of where they're going to be living and to make an informed choice. And all of those resources are free on our site.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lizanne. And just so you all are aware, we always post our links. So if you need to get to pcsgrades.com, just visit the website. It'll be posted. I want to also mention we have our military spouse group. So make sure you lean on your other military spouses that are in the area, and find those Facebook groups and get in them and ask those proper questions, which as military spouses, we are very excellent at doing. So make sure you do that as well. And there's also Millie Scout and different things that are out there to help you understand the area. So I wanted to get to another hot button topic, which is relocation costs. So in addition to this hot real estate market, right, military families are facing multiple financial stressors. One of those is out-of-pocket relocation costs. So again, according to our 2021 AFMLS, don't forget to take the one for 2022, everyone. 29% of the 8,004 respondents to the AFMLS stated that out-of-pocket relocation expenses is a top financial stressor. Excuse me. Military families can pay anywhere from $80 to $200 in out-of-pocket expenses in high-cost areas. So, but to break that down, for example, in the National Capital Region, we had 274 respondents, and 85% of those respondents reported paying monthly out-of-pocket housing costs of above $200. So that is absolutely an issue, and it's absolutely ridiculous that our military families have to experience this. However, also according to the AFMLS 2020, 77% of active duty military family members spend over $200 in out of pocket expenses, while 17% say that the bar covers their monthly expenses. So, what are some strategies to mitigate the out of pocket expenses or claim them, Megan? Because we know that you are a PCS reform advocate, and this is your jam.
Yes, absolutely. What your BAH, your housing allowance, is going to cover is definitely going to vary depending on what region of the country that you live in and are assigned to. One of the big things I like to tell everyone is when they're relocating is to first be realistic about the housing in the area that you are going to. You may not get the 4-bedroom home with the fenced yard and the dedicated office space that you are accustomed to. Depending on what's going on in the market of that area, you may have to find something that's a little bit smaller to meet your needs, to fit your budget if that's important to you. Some people, they want to have the house and are willing to pay over. Some folks are more concerned about the financial sides and want to stay under a budget and will try to find a house that they can make do with within that budget. It's important to know, just be flexible. We understand that for most of our community, the home you're moving into is probably not your forever home. We are really great within our community at making do with getting something to make do for a year or two or whatever it may be until our next PCS. So you may have to find something that is a short-term rental to get into, just that way you have a place to live, and that can give you some more time to look around more as to a house that you may need or fits your needs or fits your budget. But it gives you a place to live, being able to get into a short-term rental or a month-to-month rental. We're also seeing a lot of families look at the option of geo-batching, wherever they may be at right now, it's a great area. Their kids are established there. They're doing great in school. They can afford that area, but they can't afford housing where their next assignment is. So a lot of families are looking at geo-batching, sending their service member on to wherever it may be and finding them a short-term furnished apartment or housing of some sort, or getting a couple of roommates to rent a place, because that's more affordable than having to move the whole family into a house that they may not be able to afford. This is also where I encourage families to speak up to our senior DoD officials and their elected officials about the BAH rates. We saw that there was a part where they extended or raised some of the rates for a short period of time for COVID, and then that kind of went away. Even some places that have a COLA allowance associated with that location, we're still seeing families, even with that, struggling to afford housing, even rentals or purchasing a home, and smaller, more moderate size homes as well. So speaking up to our officials and to our senior leadership about what BAH is covering, what kind of homes it's providing within the market that we're currently in, I think is a very important step of the process, and making them realize that these rates should be relooked probably more than once a year, as that housing market fluctuates so often.
I agree. That is a great point. And these are some of hard decisions that military families are having to make, especially when it comes to geo-batching and having to separate your family. That's really hard. And I also encourage everyone to speak up and talk to senior officials and everything. Make sure that happens to get by back to 100%. I think that's super important and will help families. Maybe not cover everything, but maybe it'll help something. Delara, did you have anything to add to this question?
Yeah, I
I'm
think
happy.
the biggest thing is we have been seeing a lot of people look at geo-bacheloring, like if they are coming from North Carolina and their kids are established and everything like that, sometimes, the spouse will come up and be here on their own. The biggest thing too is I've been telling people, if it's cheaper to rent, it's cheaper to rent. If it's cheaper to buy, it's cheaper to buy. It's just we've been helping people on all aspects. So, we're doing what's better for them and not pushing them in any decisions. And I I always tell people there are ways, if you have to live a little bit further, you got to live a little bit further. If you have to live little bit smaller in order not to have to pay all those expenses out of pocket, we have all sorts of different fees here in the DMV area, depending on what county you're in. Maryland has different taxes, those kind of things. So educating is the biggest thing for us. As soon as we get that client, they need to talk with the lender. They need to see what their financial situation is going to be if they choose to purchase, and then we go back and forth about what it takes to rent versus what it takes to buy. If buying does not make sense, we're not going to do that. We're going to find you something to rent. So, and definitely not being house poor. I know you have to live somewhere, but remember, if you're house poor and the only thing you can do is be inside your house all day with your 4 kids, sometimes maybe that's not the best option because you don't have any money to go anywhere else. So, if some kids have to double up in one room, that might be a better option.
Definitely. These are some amazing tips and strategies to help our military families right now. So I really appreciate that. Before I moved on, Lizanne, did you want to add anything to this topic or?
Yeah, I did. I wanted to mention that we've seen families really turning to some creative solutions this year and kind of thinking outside the box to help mitigate those out of pocket costs. There's definitely been an increase in families moving into RVs, either as their home or temporarily while they're waiting on their long term housing. It's definitely cheaper to rent an RV and rent a space to park it than it is to, live in a hotel for 3 months. We're also seeing an increase in families buying land, not necessarily undeveloped land, but land that does not yet have a home built on it. If you have that time to plan to have a house built and use that as your retirement home or your forever home, then it's definitely cheaper to start from scratch. So we're seeing an increase in families turning to that, as well as things like buying mobile homes. It's certainly more affordable to buy a mobile home and live there than it is to live in a more traditional brick and mortar home. Again, there's pros and cons to all of these situations. So none of them are ideal for military families, but when you're trying to consider all of your housing options, it is good to look at all of them.
Thank you so much. These are definitely some creative ways that our military families are handling some of the challenges that are being thrown their way. So thank you for adding that in, Lizanne. I have personal experience of people using RVs as well. Something great to bring up. So please take the survey and let us know if that is you, if you're moving into a mobile home, if you're buying land, if you are heading into an RV with your family. Take the survey today. And shout out to Melissa for already taking the survey. She did mention that in the comments. So thank you so much, Melissa. So I wanted to ask, just to stay on this topic of out-of-pocket expenses, because some people are not aware of other expenses that military families may have, right? So Megan, this is your wheelhouse again. So what are some other out-of-pocket expenses that non-military counterparts may not be aware of that military families experience?
Yeah, so we do receive some entitlements for some topics of our move. So we do receive per diem, which helps cover meals and lodging during our travel days. We do receive a mileage rate, which can help cover some of the gas expenses for our move. But there is still a lot that is out of pocket to the family. So the additional fuel costs, because what the mileage rate is currently is not going to cover all of your fuel costs with the current rate of what gas costs. So the additional fuel costs. Pet expenses is a big one that a lot of people pay out of pocket for. There are no reimbursements or entitlements to cover pet expenses. If you're shipping a second car OCONUS, the military will pay to ship one car OCONUS, but they won't pay for two. So a lot of families, they want to take both of their cars. So that second car is out of pocket on them to ship it to an OCONUS location. Or even if they want to ship one car stateside from maybe New York to Texas or wherever it may be, that's out of pocket to the family as well. The lodging entitlement that we receive, we can claim 10 days on either side of our travel days to be reimbursed for it. But with the current housing market, we're seeing a lot of families that have to be in lodging a lot longer than those 10 days, whether they're waiting for their house to close on and they can't get into their home yet, or they're waiting for renters to move out of a home that they're going to be renting next. So we're seeing a lot of families have more lodging days that are out of pocket to them. The good thing is that all these non-reimbursed expenses, if we keep track of those receipts, we can claim them on our taxes, but it's all an upfront out-of-pocket expense to the family, which may or may not be an additional burden to them depending on what they were expecting versus what is becoming reality for them.
Thank you so much, Megan. And I want to send a special shout out to Atia Ingram because she was our tax expert on one of my Facebook Lives, and she did mention and she really delved into the topic of claiming expenses when you're moving. So don't forget to go back and watch those as well. But I wanted to really point out the pet expenses, right? Because that's huge for our military families. That's something that a lot of families are dealing with. So many challenges around it. And here at Blue Star Families, we love pets. So, can any of you tease out some of the pet challenges a little bit more? And I asked this because during our 2020 MFLS, the allowance of pets was an issue. So 41% of families stated that pet allowance is a factor in their housing decision, as I mentioned earlier. While half of civilian rental housing allows for pets, only 9% allows pets without any restrictions on the size or type. So we have a ton of pet lovers in our community. So again, what is the issue with pets that you hear the most?
I can
And
start
Delara,
with this one.
I'm sorry, go ahead,
Oh,
Megan.
no, I was gonna say I can start with this one a little bit in regards to some of the pet expenses. We saw COVID kind of throw a big wrench into a lot of people's plans with pets. We saw a lot of the airlines limit, reduce, or get rid of their pet spots on airlines altogether, and so a lot of folks had to turn to private shippers, and those expenses became kind of astronomical to them. So the first major hurdle of having pets was how are you getting your pet from one location to the other, and as we said, pet expenses is not something that is reimbursed or paid for by the DoD. And then in regards to housing, there's a lot of houses. I mean, if you're on post, you have a restriction to the number of pets you can have, and usually there's a breed restriction as well. If you're renting a home, usually there's, again, a breed or pet limit restriction there also. And so for my family personally, we have several pets and we love them and could never imagine getting rid of them. And we've had instances where we've offered to pay over the rental amount that was listed to be able to have the additional pets that we have, or to pay higher pet fees, pet deposits to be able to have the pets that we have. And so we've seen where, because of the pet expenses, because of the restrictions in housing, we've seen some families either have to rehome their pets to someone else, or it may be pushing them into having to buy a house that they weren't ready to buy because they can't get into on-base housing, or they can't find a rental that will allow them to either have the breeds they have or to have the number of pets that they have.
That's such a difficult situation to be in and a difficult choice to make. Delara, I saw you shaking your head a lot on this one, so you probably have some experiences or stories to share around this. So I would love for you to chime in.
Yeah, so I have a few. I had pets when I PCS from Hawaii, from Seattle to Hawaii, and then Hawaii back stateside. And a lot of people don't know you can't ship certain pets. You can't have them travel during hot months because it gets way too hot in the cargo planes, or short-snouted dogs. There's restrictions on flying them. And then PCSing. So obviously we help a lot of families work to rent something. And there are a lot of rentals out there that don't allow pets at all, whether it be cats, dogs. Some don't allow cats, some only allow dogs. Depends on the weight, everything like that. And not to mention, there are some counties that don't let you have breed restricted dogs. So when you're moving somewhere, it's something to keep in mind. Even if you're renting, your landlord or yourself can get fined for having a breed restricted dog in that county, or breed restricted cat. There are some cats that are not allowed in certain places because of their breeds. So there's definitely a lot of research that has to go into it, but the cost is also astronomical. I think we paid over, not only that, but we had to pay for somebody to watch our pets, put them on a plane, send them to us. Somebody picked them up on the other end because we were in the midst of travel. So obviously paying some friends, paying some boarding places, and then also the vet costs that come with shipping your pets. So if you're coming, or if you're going or coming from Hawaii, they have to have certain vaccinations. I mean, it's just a laundry list of stuff, and the money that you put into your pets, God love them, love my pets, but it's definitely a high cost to keep your family together for sure.
Oh
It
my
is.
goodness. Wow.
And I
Lizanne,
wanted,
did you have something as well?
yeah, I wanted to expand a little on the OCONUS costs, because yes, Hawaii counts as OCONUS, but we also have military families going to Japan and Guam and Germany. My family lived in Spain for a few years, and anytime you get PCS orders to those locations, pet fees are not covered. So there are a few pet spaces every month on the military rotator flights, but those spaces are first come, first serve. They are not guaranteed. And like she said, during the hotter months, it is more difficult to travel. So the cost of taking a pet on a commercial flight just becomes astronomical. Families have told us anywhere from $8,000, $10,000 for a large dog to be PCSed to Japan. And again, none of that is reimbursed. So because you don't always know what orders are coming next, you can't always anticipate when you'll have those OCONUS orders. It's so important for pet owners to save up those funds, be prepared, have a plan, and know whether or not your pet would be able to go with you overseas, or whether you'd prefer to, maybe rehome them with family that you know and love and relatives in the States, or have, there are some grant programs and some scholarships that we've interviewed and featured on PCS Grades that help families with those high costs of relocating with your pets.
Wow, what a wealth of information. And something that I'm continuously hearing over and over is the education piece. Like, it's so important to have the information and education on hand so that our military families can make the best decision for them, especially when it comes to finances. And this pet issue is huge. And we definitely need more data on this as well. So I would love for people to share their stories in the AFMLS, because we are really touching on some of the housing challenges that military families are experiencing. Well, I wanted to thank everyone. This has been so amazing. I have learned so much from each of you, and I'm quite sure our audience has as well. I wanted to leave you all with some last thoughts from each of you, and then also to let people know where can they follow you, how can they get in touch with you, how can they go to your website. This is your time. Let people know how to get in touch with you, and anyone can start.
Well, I'll jump in. PCS Grades can be found at pcsgrades.com. That's where you'll find all of our free reviews. You'll find our area guides listed there, and you can connect with a military-friendly real estate agent, all from the homepage. So we do hope you'll stop by.
I'll go next. You can find me, my public page on Facebook is called PCS Like a Pro. I also have a private Facebook group called PCS Like a Pro, Your Smooth Move. So if you need any help with your PCS, the policy, procedures, regulations, updated guidance on anything coming out of Transcom, the services, or the moving industry, you can find that all listed right there in my group. And if you have any trouble through the process, we're always happy to jump in and help out and help connect you with whatever office you need to.
Yeah, and for us, I just say take it one day at a time. And definitely, if you're moving into the DMV, Northern Virginia, DC area, we are licensed in Virginia and DC. You can find us at our website at www.thevaliantgrp.com or on Facebook. And we also have another Facebook page to join for local events and such. So if you're looking for someone to help you PCS to this area, we would love to help. And again, one day at a time.
Thank you all so much. This has been such an amazing conversation. And everyone out there, be sure to support a military spouse. These are all military spouses, and we have a veteran on our panel as well. Support their businesses, support what they're doing. Go to each of their pages, join the groups, be in the know. And I wanted to thank you all again for listening. Um, Thanks so much.
Thanks for having us.